cringed at this part. Okay, it's okay. How many of you all do app development or hybrid app development? Hybrid app development. I guess that's a no. Anybody? No one? Have you guys been interested in it? Want to get into it? Yeah? Okay, excellent. Well, then we're all in the right place. So, a hybrid app is an application that lets you use the same code base across every single interface that your app's going to be on. So it's kind of like responsive web design, where you have the same code and it works good on a really wide screen and a tiny little phone screen, but this has more pizzazz to it. It's got functionality in it. And when I say interface, I'm not talking just about iOS and Android. You know, this can be the same code that's going to run in a car or on your computer or in a smartwatch. You know, it really works everywhere. Last November, I joined a hack weekend project downtown, and the group I worked with, we built a little app that basically lets you look at legislation and lets you vote on it if you're for or against it, and then compares your votes to our actual representatives so you can see if they're in line with you and if they're actually representing you, so that when it comes up to voting time, you can vote them in or get rid of them. I used WordPress as the back end for this and Ionic for the front end. This was the first time I ever made a hybrid app, the first time I made an Ionic app, and I did it all in a weekend. Right there. So I'm just going to kind of go into why Ionic's cool, how I was able to do all this in a weekend with no prior knowledge of it, and then at the end of that, we're going to have a workshop, and you guys are going to get to jump into, and hopefully you guys can come out with something neat to bring home. So Ionic. It's a single-page web application framework that comes with all the tools that you'll need to package up your code. You literally, when you get it, you get everything that you'll need to go from an empty page to a full running APK and iOS app. Now all it is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So it's all the code stuff that we're used to working with. And it has a little bit of Angular. So I'm an Angular developer. That was perfect for me because I didn't have to learn anything new. If you're not an Angular developer and you're still trying to figure out what kind of framework to use, you should spend some time and really consider if Angular is going to be worth the learning curve of it. And if you want to add that to your library of skills and tools that you use. Ionic comes with a really good command line tool. It lets you really easily do things like add new libraries, add new plugins. You can email the app to people, which I thought was super cool. It helped a lot in the hack weekend. And it plugs into all your build tools like Grunt or Gulp. And it makes it feel like you're working on any other kind of web application that you normally would. Now, hybrid app development is a really busy space. These are just some of the tools out there, and there's a lot more. And about every 3 months, there'll be like another 20 or so. These things are just popping up and falling down like crazy. And like I said about Ionic, because it's Angular, because it's HTML, CSS, it was a really good fit for me. It might not be right for you. I know Planning Center does a lot in React Native. So it really just comes down to personal preference. I'm not going to say do Ionic because it's the best, because it probably won't be the best for everybody. It just worked out for me. So why did I use WordPress for Represent Me? It seems kind of strange that I'd use a LAMP stack CMS to power an app, right? It's kind of totally bizarre as an idea, right? Well, before I get into that, I'm going to talk about data and how we're used to seeing it. So one option is keeping your data inside your app. Like this example. This is the last 6 events that we've had in Front-End Authority. So if you guys know any kind of Angular, basically I'm making an array that my data is going to be able to use, and each piece of the array has a title and an ID number. It looks pretty simple, right? Well, it's very 90s, I'd say. It's all static. It's all hard-coded in the app. If we want to give new data to the app, a person would have to re-download the app or go through a full update. That's pretty lame. So another tool we can do is third-party APIs. Because Ionic is a web tool, we get access to normal web things that we're used to using on our production sites today. So, for example, tonight we're going to use Meetup's API to pull in live data from Meetup to fill up our apps with code and content. Here are just some other ideas of things you could do with third-party APIs. So let's say Big Bear has a temperature gauge at the top of their mountain that tells you how much snow there is and what the temperature is. You can make an app that will set an alarm for you in the morning and say, wake up, don't go to work, go skiing. So if we can do third-party APIs, we can do first-party, right? We can have our own websites serve up all the data that we want. For me, that was having my WordPress site give all of its data to the app in the exact way that I wanted it to do. And to do that, WordPress has this JSON REST API plugin. Once you get that installed in your site, you get access to all the data as a JSON object. So, for example, we've got custom data types, meta information, user architecture, all that's for free in WordPress. So with that plugin, boom, you have a really, really complex architecture for your app already. During the hackathon, I was with a non-technical team. So I just made them all accounts in the WordPress site, and I said, put in the data, put in all the legislation, all the representatives, how they voted. You guys just set up and go. And then I focused on all the code stuff. And it actually worked out in the end because WordPress is that easy to enter content into. WordPress has a huge plugin infrastructure. You know, I say don't reinvent the wheel, just use someone else's wheels. You can still get access to all of the content that those plugins give you. And of course, you get a website for free. That's pretty nice. So it's super easy to set up. These 6 command line commands will have you up and running with an app. As you can see in the background, it got a little bit cut off, but you just run grunt serve after it's all installed, and boom, you have a fully interactive app running in the browser. And hopefully we'll be doing that tonight. Again, I don't know how many of you guys do much WordPress stuff, but here's a Git diff of how to actually make the app talk to the WordPress service. In the code sample that you guys can look at tonight, I have an example of you doing it as a static data, as a data in a JSON file that you pull in, and doing something like this and actually talking to a service. So you can actually look at it. Now, Ionic has a lot of UI tools to it too. It's kind of like Bootstrap, where it's got column grid layout, all these things, cards, inputs, toggles, pretty much any core modern UI tool that we're used to using, or UX feature, Ionic has it already. And it's really well tested, and you know that it's going to run as performant across all the different applications or all the different interfaces that your app's going to be used on. And it takes out a lot of the headache of having to, like make something work in Mozilla Firefox and IE8 at the same time. Those days are long gone. So it does it through familiar CSS classes. The first example, we've got a button large, and button positive. So that just defines what the element's going to be, how it's going to look, and how it's going to interact. Again, the next one, card, similar things. If you do Bootstrap, Foundation, any other of those big UI frameworks, it's all the same. And there's a few custom elements. So the first example, that is all the code that you need to make a homepage. It just basically says hello world, right? The second one does a navigation. This stuff, because these elements are already made and they come with a little bit of custom functionality to really make the app feel like a native app on a phone or act like a normal web app in a browser, this helped me pivot the Hack Weekend project really quickly, because halfway through, the group decided that we were going to do something else completely. So if it weren't for these things, we probably wouldn't have been able to get it done. Now, AngularJS, got to talk a little bit about it. Great power, great learning curves. How many guys do Angular? None? Okay. How about, I don't know, you guys use Polymer, React, Other frameworks? No? Okay, Backbone? All right, well, maybe now's a good time to learn Angular. It definitely takes a lot of work at first to get the gist of it and try and get used to it. But once it clicks, kind of like all the other web stuff that we do, like, whoa, I get it. And now you're just flying through your code. And it's super easy. I really like Angular because I do it day to day. But for something like this, I can use the exact same code base for the mobile app to make a web interface. So let's say, you know, we want someone with a kiosk in front of a voting booth someday, or like a tablet. They can be like, before you go in, take a look at what you're actually going to have to vote on and give it some thought before you go in and try and change our country. Angular has very, very cool directive aspect to it. They're basically just HTML5 elements, so you can name them whatever you want. For example, we could make an element called meetup events, and then we could give it an attribute for what order we want, like if we want them from oldest to newest or from newest to oldest. Basically, you can think of these tags as just holes where you put in any kind of templatable code and just inject that into there. And all the code comes with all of its custom logic that it will need too. So you get all these really nice little modular pieces that you can just place anywhere you want. It's a super good platform for single-page apps. This example is routing in Angular. It will kind of probably look like gobbledygook if you're not used to seeing routing stuff. But basically, what I want to show is that you can pass a lot of data to stuff really easily. So it's all running out of one index.html file. But like, for example, if you go to event / let's say our event ID is 42, we now can define what template it's going to open. We can define the logic that's going to run on that page. We can pass variables to it, like the ID. And we can have that one page act, or that one view, that section of our page, act completely differently to, let's say, like a search part of our site. The last awesome thing about Ionic is that it works super well with Cordova, or NG Cordova specifically. And what that gives us is a huge library of all the really important native phone functionality. So these are some of them: barcode scanner, camera. Like, I didn't even know phones had barcode scanners as just like a native part of them, but apparently they do. Okay, yeah. So how JavaScript gets access to these. So NG Cordova is basically the engine behind it. It's the translator between JavaScript and the native code. So, right, yeah, okay, yeah. So Ionic's running the app. Like, you download it like you would any other normal app, but when it opens, it's just opening a browser on the phone. Right, exactly. So this gives you an API to do really easy calls to access stuff like make the phone vibrate, things like that. Any other questions about Cordova? Yeah.
Sorry, with the Ionic, I know I've heard in the past stuff like phone gap, there's like a significant performance hit.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the same with Ionic, or is it?
So Ionic in ways is phone gap. Phone gap and Cordova are the same thing.
Okay.
So an Ionic app is never going to be as performant as a native app, but that doesn't mean it's going to feel slow. Cool, groovy on that. All right, guys. That's all. That's the intro to Ionic. I know I kind of. Yeah. So communicating with the WordPress site, I was communicating with our own WordPress site. Part of the requirement that you need is that the WordPress site has those endpoints open for your app to talk to. So like when you request /posts, the WordPress site needs to not go to the posts page. It needs to actually serve up JSON data. So like if you try to do this on the New York Times, because they're using this stuff, you could, except that they'll probably kick you out. They probably have authentication as part of it. Yeah. Yeah, it's similar. Yeah, so Ionic has the base code, the framework. That's all open, free. But then you can also use their services to do things like, again, push notifications or get better analytics data on your app. It's at representmenow.co. If you go to the download page, you can take a swing at it and look at 8 pieces of actual California legislation that 3 of our actual representatives voted on. You can see how you line up with them. To get the legislation in, ideally we would just pull that data in live, do another kind of API call. I think that Google takes all the legislations going on and all that political info and shares it all open source. For us, in the weekends, we just had one of our teammates go through about 30 pieces of legislation and pick out 8 ones he thought were cool. When you get to the actual packaging process, I had a lot of trouble with it the first time because you need special licenses just to package a fully working like iOS downloadable app sample. To get your app in the Android store, the license is $25 a year. Apple, I think, is $100. The Android one, you can still package an APK and just share that with anyone you want, and they can download it. For the iOS one, I think as long as you have the device plugged into your computer, you can send it over. But I don't have an iPhone, so I couldn't really test that out. Ionic, on the other hand, they have a really cool tool called Ionic View that lets you, as the developer, email your app to anyone with the Ionic View app. And they scroll through all of their things and they can update them in time. Ionic View. Yep. And it was really useful. After the first night, or the second night of the hackathon, I just sent it out to all the team and they got to play with it before the next day. They came in with changes and suggestions. It was super easy. This was November, so I haven't had the time to do another project. There's a lot of, it was a sleep-deprived, very rushed weekend, so there's a lot of refactoring in the code that needs to happen. But yeah, so for this, I went in knowing that I wanted to make an app. I wanted to use Ionic just because it seemed like it would be fast enough to do it. So it went in from being a mobile-first approach. I'm sure going from a current web app to mobile, you definitely have to think of design stuff, and other concerns. So, yeah.
You designed it for mobile. You didn't design it for that.
Right. Yeah, that too. So if we took the same code and ran it on a browser, it'd be this tiny menu on one side, and then just this huge amount of empty space and a little bit of content and a yes/no button. So yeah, there's a lot to consider about making it work, make the same styles work across different kinds of devices.